Hi to my fellow migraine warriors out there and all of you who are connected with the migraine community. My name is Josephine Lau. I'm a volunteer here at Migraine Australia. For Migraine Awareness Month this year, our theme is Give Migraine a Break, and we're asking for equal access to medical treatments and medication. We're trusting that all of our work here will raise awareness of migraine and reduce stigma around our condition. Today, we have Alicia Wolf joining us. I met Alicia a little while back on Instagram, and I've loved her advocacy work for migraine, and in particular, her migraine-friendly recipes. My favorite ones are the drinks because they're just so easy and yummy. And Alicia is also the author of best-selling cookbooks, of which I have a copy too, The Dizzy Cook and The Mediterranean Migraine Diet. She was diagnosed with chronic vestibular migraine in 2016, which changed her life forever. She's now able to manage sometimes 100% symptom-free days, all from a great treatment plan and a migraine-friendly diet. The recipes that she shares are easy to make, delicious, and I can vouch for that, and perfect for anyone who wants to boost their brain health. So, without further ado, let me welcome Alicia. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's really fun to be here.
Good to have you. Alicia, tell us your migraine story and your journey to getting the clinical diagnosis in 2016.
Yeah, so this was a really difficult one. It will be almost 10 years next year, which seems crazy to me. But basically, I started with very episodic symptoms. So one day I woke up and I was just having this dizziness that would kind of come and go throughout the day. It just felt more like a fuzzy head, like my head was floaty feeling. It wasn't too terrible to ignore it, but my ears would plug up and my head felt a lot of pressure, and I started having more light sensitivity. And so I went to my primary care doctor, and she was just like, "Oh, you probably have a cold or something that's going on with your ears. It looks fine. You don't have an ear infection." And so they prescribed me steroids off and on, and I would feel a little bit better, and then everything would come back. And this started just getting progressively worse until the dizziness would get so strong that sometimes, like, I remember the biggest inclination that something was very wrong with me was I was driving a few of my coworkers to lunch one day, and it felt like I had parked the car and it felt like my car was rolling forward. And so I slammed on the brakes, but I had already been in park, and I looked at everyone else. I was like, "Did you guys not feel that?" And everyone was looking at me like I was crazy. And it made me realize, okay, this is not normal. Like, this had been going on for, like 2 months or so. And it was just progressively getting stronger for me. And so I saw an ENT. All my testing came back normal. And then he sent me to vestibular therapist who had me doing vestibular therapy 5 times a day, or 5 times a week. And I was just getting worse and worse and worse until one night I had like a terrible vertigo attack, like on the floor. Felt like everything was moving on me. I mean, I thought, oh my gosh, I have a brain tumor. Like, this is not normal at all. So he took me to in the US, we call it the ER here. And they ran a bunch of tests. They did an MRI and everything. And they said everything was totally normal. And so in the ER, they're just trying to make sure you're not going to die. So they diagnosed me with vertigo and sent me home with meclizine, none of which helped me. Um, I told they asked me to follow up with the neurologist. The neurologist was like, "Oh, you're just stressed out. It's fine." No one ever mentioned migraine to me. And I had all the other symptoms of migraine, just not any headache or head pain with it. And so I was getting missed by ENTs, neurologists, all these different doctors. And I live in a big city. I live in Dallas, Texas. So we have a lot of good doctors here. And I had heard about this doctor, this neurologist, who was supposedly the dizzy doctor, and he helped patients with unexplained dizziness. But he had this big long wait list, and so I got on his wait list. And in that time period, I was slowly losing who I was. I was like losing my job. I could not keep up with everything, and my job, my HR department wanted me to tell them what was wrong with me, and no one would give me a diagnosis besides like anxiety. And so I just had had enough of seeing 7 or 8 different doctors and no one knowing what was wrong with me. And I had this like desperate plea on Facebook, and it comes up on my Facebook timeline every year. And it just reminds me so much of feeling really extremely low. And I just reached out and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm about to lose my career that I worked so hard for and my job, and I can't drive anymore. My husband has to take me everywhere. We just got married last year. Like, my life can't be over like this. And someone had recommended that I go to the Mayo Clinic in Arizona. So we drove 16 hours to go there because my vestibular therapist had told me not to fly at the time because they mistakenly thought I had an issue with my inner ear. And after 2 days of testing, they said, "Oh, you have migraine." I was like, "No, you're crazy. I don't have migraines. Like, I don't have headaches. What the heck?" Because that's all I knew about migraine at the time, was migraine equaled a bad headache. And the ENT there, he was like, "No, I see people with inner ear disorders all the time, and this is a type of migraine that affects your inner ear, and it can cause dizziness and vertigo like you're experiencing." Well, it turns out that dizzy doctor eventually got me in, the one in Dallas, and he was an expert at handling vestibular migraine. And so he's my current neurologist now. And so when I got back home, I eventually saw him, and having 2 doctors agree on that diagnosis, especially one that was an expert in it, I finally accepted it myself. I was like, okay, if this is a type of migraine that's like fairly new to being diagnosed and we're starting to learn about it and everything, this is something I have to try to treat, and hopefully it gets better. And so, sure enough, it was a slow process, but we started to treat the vestibular migraine, and very, very slowly I started to make improvements. And so, as I started to make improvements, it sort of solidified everything for me too, that it was migraine, just because I had my own idea of what migraine was, and it's so ingrained in us what it is from like media and movie. Like, everything we see is just these people going like this, but you don't hear about the people who are having the vertigo attacks or like the hemiplegic type of migraines. So that's my story, really, of how I got diagnosed and how difficult it was me for this particular type of migraine. And it's really what led to my advocacy for vestibular migraine in particular.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks for sharing that, Alicia.
Sure.
I'm sure many can relate to your story, or even just halfway of the story, where all the symptoms that they're feeling and they're feeling like this is not right, but not getting to a diagnosis yet. So I'm really hopeful that hearing what you've shared will lead others who are experiencing similar things to go down the path of, finding the right treatment or the right diagnosis, right doctor, and not giving up. And funny you say,
Hmm.
it's also a journey of acceptance.
Hmm.
Lack of education on what migraine is, because my own mom,
Yeah.
and obviously I'm not a physician. She has very similar symptoms of vestibular.
Yeah.
Again, my mom thinks migraine is headache, and she's a little,
Headache. Yeah.
sorry, mom. So oh, it's like I don't have migraine, I get headaches, but she's always dizzy and all this stuff. So I feel
Mm.
like there still needs to be a lot of work done to fight the stigma and also to redefine really what migraine is. Um,
Yeah, because people always keep searching for something deeper. And sometimes migraine does have other, you do have these things that are kind of going on in the background, but it's also a neurological disorder. And I don't think people realizes like how bad it can get and how greatly it can affect your everyday life. They always think, oh, it has to be something else because that's just what we've been told. But as you start to meet others in this community and get involved with advocacy, you realize like it is such a spectrum disorder where you have some people who are having the occasional attack every couple of months, and then other people who are just like completely debilitated. And how I saw it with my own journey is because no one was treating me and helping me stop. It's like a freight train. Because no one was helping me stop these attacks, it got to the point where it picked up speed, and it was so much harder for me to break that cycle, and it just turned chronic because no one was really helping me with a plan on it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you are here where you are now. And I'm sure although you focus a lot on vestibular for your work, but what do you think is
Mhm.
the extent that your approach can also be used to help other migraine types?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the only difference with vestibular is really in some of the acute and preventative treatments, they're a little bit different because if you're dealing with people with more motion sickness, dizziness, vertigo, you have sometimes different acute meds work better for us. So there are certain preventative meds too that can kind of help people with dizziness more, but most of the preventative meds are the same for all types of migraine, whether it's vestibular or just like your traditional classic type of migraine. I don't know what we call that, but the migraine with the head pain and all the other classic symptoms like the light sensitivity and sound sensitivity. And all the principles of it are the same. I believe Migraine Strong calls it the treatment pie, where they say, you know, you have your meds and your supplements and your diet changes and your sleep schedule and your mindfulness and meditation, and all these little pieces kind of come together in treating the whole. And that's really, no matter what type of migraine, that's really how you have to look at it. It's not just one thing that fixes it. Unfortunately, it's usually a combination of things.
And now I have a question. Actually, this is a widely discussed question from us Aussies, and I wonder if you have any insights on. I think we've had a separate discussion previously about it. It's so interesting about Vegemite. First, tried Vegemite yourself.
No, so I have tried it myself before. We can get it at some places around here, like different types of grocery stores, but it's not very common in the US. I will say, so when you asked me about it and if it could be used for migraine attacks, I thought that's really interesting because there's different aspects to different foods that can either be helpful for people or be a trigger. And I think it can be kind of a comfort food for people in your area. Like it's something maybe they grew up with, and so that they could potentially find comfort in it. I also noticed that it has a lot of B vitamins in it too. So, like B6 has been studied. It's actually really helpful for nausea and really commonly given to pregnant patients to help with morning sickness too. And so that's where B6 kind of fits in. B12 has been studied for migraine, as well as B2 is really popular migraine preventative. So that could be where it is kind of helpful. On the other end, it does have yeast extract in it, which I do see to be a trigger for a lot of people just because of the amount of glutamate that's in it. And it just depends on someone's personal sensitivity. So some of these items with yeast extract in it can sort of act. It's not quite MSG, but it can act sort of like MSG in the body. And so if you have a particular sensitivity to MSG in particular, or some people have like extreme sensitivities to natural glutamate. Like I have some readers who can't tolerate soy sauce is something that's high in it, or even mushrooms or Parmesan cheese have a lot of like that umami flavor that has that natural glutamate in it too. So it just really depends on someone's personal sensitivity. And the way you would find that out and what you're kind of sensitive to is through a migraine diet or a migraine elimination diet. Here in the US, it's sometimes called the Johns Hopkins migraine diet because it's based off of their clinic. Some people are familiar with the popular book Heal Your Headache by Dr. David Buchholz. That was like my migraine Bible when I first got diagnosed. It was just such a huge book. And it really helped explain the whole set of treatments and how I needed to look at everything in a big picture kind of way. And so that's where you can kind of find a migraine elimination diet perspective, which is meant to sort of help calm down your brain and help you discover what any food triggers might be. And so if you suspect Vegemite is making things worse, maybe like take some time off of it and then try to reintroduce it. Or like if it's not bothering you and it's a comfort food, I mean, keep having it. I know some people in the States, they love a McDonald's burger and fries and a Coke, and that seems to help them with an attack. So, in my site, I try to give like healthier alternatives to that. But like if it's something that helps you and brings you joy in that moment, as long as you're not doing it every single day, I think it's, why not help with an attack?
Oh, interesting. I didn't grow up
Yeah.
or spend my childhood years in Australia. So I was only
Yeah.
into it Vegemite when I was in boarding school when I was
Okay.
15. And I just loved it. That
Yeah.
I know it's a very
It's very
controversial,
polarizing, I've heard.
just loved it. And then I associated that with comfort as well, just because I had
Yeah.
my friends in boarding school who were introducing me. I just came from Hong Kong. And they were like, oh, you gotta try this thing. So when I have it, I tend to have it like as my first go-to with a cracker or like a plain piece of toast after a very severe attack. And that brings
Okay.
comfort. So I'm not sure for myself,
Yeah.
I would call it an abortive, but
Yeah.
so much of it is also what your brain kind of associates with comfort as well, I think. As I mean, gut
Exactly.
brain, yeah, it can get so complicated, but yeah. So, like you said, right?
Yeah, I mean, like some of my most popular recipes, I've been reworking those comfort foods that we know and love to, just have fewer additives and flavorings or fewer preservatives or fewer, colorings, dyes, that sort of thing, and maybe less sugar. Like one of them that I've done, boxed mac and cheese, is like a big comfort food here in the US where a lot of kids grew up with that. And so I reworked that to just have all natural ingredients that are more migraine friendly than, your typical orange cheese. And that you're still getting the comfort from it, but without, the other things that are not as helpful for your brain.
Mhm, mhm. And so it sounds like you manage your vestibular migraine by a combination of methods, food, obviously is your main thing as well, but it's also, excuse me, the lifestyle. You talked about yoga earlier and massage. Do you have any advice for people who are overwhelmed and just don't know where to start managing their migraine? Perhaps maybe even starting from the food perspective. I know you mentioned just then like the food diary. Um,
Yeah,
but I do remember vaguely as well, like, and because I bought your book, The Dizzy Cook, a while back, but you
yeah,
also
yeah.
have tips and lots of insights on the different types of food that can be or has shown to be triggers of migraine. Can you speak to that, or where would be a starting point?
Yeah, I think it just depends on your personal relationship with food. So the Dizzy cookbook is more about common food triggers, but that doesn't, I think a lot of people get confused and they think, oh, these are just all bad foods for migraine. And that's not necessarily true. Just because something's a more common food trigger, it just means that it may be more commonly found to trigger attacks in some people. But as we've seen in studies, some people have chocolate be a craving before a migraine attack. Some people, it's an actual trigger for them. And that can, there are a lot of components of chocolate that makes sense that it would be a trigger, you know. Um, Even things like caffeine, like I'm very sensitive to caffeine. And so how you kind of have to look at it is like, what's your relationship with food? And like, do you have a healthy relationship with food where you're not going to automatically assume all these foods are bad? If it feels very reasonable for you to do an elimination diet, I do think that's like the most helpful way to go. And that kind of teaches you how to read labels, what to look out for, how to shop your grocery store and really start cooking more at home, more from scratch, and pay attention to what's going in your foods, which is why I really liked it and then why it was really helpful for me too. And I started to discover after a few months, I started seeing bigger results along with medications and supplements. But um, I used to eat, I used to have almond milk in my coffee every day. I used to have yogurt, like Greek yogurt, every single day. And those turned out to be some of my biggest triggers that I noticed with food, but I was eating them every day and I was dizzy every day, so I couldn't really tell until I took them out of my diet for a little bit, allowed my brain to calm down and started to reintroduce them. And now that, and it also doesn't mean they'll be triggers forever. I mean, yogurt was a very severe trigger for me 8 or 9 years ago. And now that I'm in a better controlled place and I've really gotten control of my attacks and I rarely have attacks now, I've been starting to play around with different types of making my own yogurt at home and realizing I'm sensitive to certain cultures, bacterial cultures that they put in the yogurt. So I've been making my own at home and like playing around with different starters and seeing what works for me and what doesn't. So it's just kind of fascinating how that can work and work for different people. Because I have some people who do fine with nuts, or like I do fine with citrus, and it's a trigger for someone else. So it's just kind of something you have to play around with. But the Dizzy Cook does a good job at like letting you know of what those more common trigger foods are, and then obviously like things that aren't great for your brain. So those would be things like a lot of additives, like food dyes, stuff like that, that we just don't want to be consuming a lot of anyway. So that's where that kind of diet kind of helps. And then I have a newer book called The Mediterranean Migraine Diet with my neurologist, Dr. Shin Bei. And what that diet kind of goes into is a more scientific approach where he really dove into the studies that was out there about like what do we actually know about migraine triggers and what are foods that can actually be beneficial for brain health. So the Mediterranean migraine diet is more of like a long-term way of eating, and it's how I eat now that I've reintroduced a lot of foods, and it's more of an anti-inflammatory focus than, oh, these foods aren't great for migraine. It allows you to see like what foods you should include more of. So we focus heavily on things like omega-3s, which is in salmon. Chia seeds are a big one, and different types of fruits and vegetables, leafy greens, a lot of dark berries, which can have a lot of antioxidants, just things that are really good for your brain health and have like neuroprotective qualities to them. So, how you can use those things in your cooking. So, it's sort of like the next step in improving your brain health after you figure out your triggers. There's no one way that's perfect for anyone. I think it's just got to be what's going to work for you, because I've seen people do the elimination diet and they're just so stressed out and they're only eating chicken every day. And like that's not good for your gut health either. So it just kind of, you have to kind of see, okay, what's going to work for me in my lifestyle? What's like a healthy approach for me? And sometimes that's doing the elimination, but finding a dietitian to kind of support you along the way. If you're someone like me that loves to cook and sees it as a challenge, maybe you can do it in a healthy way and use my recipes online and it'll be easy for you. Or you could just try the Mediterranean migraine diet where you're including more of these brain healthy foods rather than focusing on eliminating. I know that's not always a helpful answer to say like, oh, you got to figure it out, but you really do because if there were one approach to if there's one approach to helping everyone with their migraine, like that's what every neurologist would do. Like neurologists would probably be out of jobs because we just post that online, everyone would do it, you know. So yeah,
Because,
it's
yeah, it's
yeah,
about being aware that these things are something that you can look into, as opposed to this is the formula to get you out of, migraine attacks. I feel like anyone who promises that, I'm really,
yeah.
it really works. But like to your point, it's like you wish it was so simple that it was a formula like these foods be a sure win to get you out, but it isn't, right? It's more.
It's not. Yeah, and it's too bad. I will say, like, what seems to be the most effective and quickest way for people to see changes is the elimination diet. That is my best-selling book. It's the one I get the most feedback on, that it's just like it's worked really extremely well for people. And I get good feedback on both, but I have to say, like, I know sometimes the elimination diet gets flack, but I get a lot of messages saying that it works for people. So I think if people are sometimes looking for that fix or the quick fix, that's one I usually try to point them to first.
For me, I found out that without even knowing, because I was loving avocado and was very cheap at one point years ago, and I was having it every morning for breakfast. And because it was
Yeah.
the same thing I was doing, a bit like your almond milk situation. And then
Yeah.
I just thought, I'd do looking everywhere until I came across I didn't know it was called the elimination diet, but it was just being aware of what you're putting into your mouth. It can be a way
Yeah.
to help with migraine management. So I guess
Yeah.
give it a go for
Sometimes it's these little things and you come across it on your list and you're like, I do have that quite a bit. Maybe I should take it out for a little bit and see. I had a friend, she doesn't have attacks as often as me, but she was having lemon water every day. And she saw my list and she's like, I didn't know lemons were a potential migraine trigger. I said, well, just don't have it in your water for a month and see what happens. Sure enough, like it got rid of her, it got rid of her occasional attacks. So it's just sometimes it's crazy stuff like that.
I've slowly introduced avocado back into my
Mhm.
diet, but
Yeah.
I needed to get out of the flare as you were
Mhm.
let the body settle first. And then even then now I'm very careful. I might just have a little, I might not like completely I used to, if I see it in a salad, I will not touch.
Yeah.
Now, if it's like a little bit on top of a salad, I'll have a piece or two, little cube,
Yeah.
and I found that it's okay. I can manage. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just learning more about yourself and the diet kind of gives you tools to do that and I think that's a more healthy approach to it and it's good for your gut health to try to keep as much in as you can too.
Okay, diet aside, I know you've got lots of tools. What's in your migraine toolbox?
Oh, okay. So I have I just took off my S's because they're so dark and I knew we were doing video, but I love my Avalex glasses. I wear them all the time. I have them. They're probably like my most used migraine tool that I use. They were like the best investment for me because I wear them when I'm on screens all day with my advocacy work and then the website writing and posting and even with the photography editing. I just spend so much time on the computer and it really helps my eyes. So those are like one of my favorite things that I do. And then I always have my acute meds with me. So for me, that's a beta blocker eye drop. And I also have a benzodiazepine, which I use when I'm like traveling a lot, or if I have like a really severe attack, which I haven't had in a while. I also really love my devices. So I use Truvaga, which is a vagus nerve stimulator. I do that every night before bed, not just to help me with like sleep and anxiety, but vagus nerve can be really helpful for like dizziness and nausea and all different types of issues that are associated with migraine. So I use that every day as kind of like a preventative treatment that also helps with, stress and anxiety. And then I like to use my Cephally device if I'm ever having like an acute attack and I just can lay in bed and watch TV with it or something. And that just that stimulates your trigeminal nerve. So I usually use it. I haven't, I used to never get pain with my attacks. And then when I started nearing 40, and after I had kids, for some reason the pain started to come in. So I found that Cephally really helps with like any type of like painful attacks that I have. And then I also always carry something to eat with me. So a big water bottle and then something to eat that usually has protein. So sometimes that's like meatballs that I'll stuff in my bag. Like a mozzarella cheese stick, I'll do. I just try to always carry something that's a little more substantial with me. Or like if I'm running out the door, I'll try to make myself like a smoothie with protein in it with like cottage cheese. And I have this like sunflower or pumpkin seed protein powder that I really like to use. So it helps to kind of balance my blood sugar more as I'm running around with the kids and stuff. Because, blood sugar fluctuations, especially like low blood sugar, can also be a contributor to attacks, especially for me as I get older. So those are the kind of things that I kind of carry around with me and travel a lot with.
Is there something that you've tried that's super weird? Like you heard it from somebody or you saw it on the internet? What's the question is, what is the weirdest thing you've tried, if you remember?
Um, I I think I've fallen for like a few of the TikTok things. I never tried the banana peel on the head. I've tried a lot of like chiropractic, acupuncture, which I don't know if that's all that weird. Um, I've tried essential oils. I just didn't have a big benefit from them. I think that they maybe help some people, but that just wasn't my journey. So
Stay with more
yeah,
stuff medically researched, I suspect.
I know.
I've
I'm
heard of
trying to think of what else I've done that I tried feverfew. That did not go well for me. I realized like I have some kind of reaction to that. So that wasn't one that I liked either. So it's just, but nothing like super. I haven't been putting banana peels on my head or anything.
I've never
I
heard
did. I will tell you, whenever I had vertigo, it's like the essential oils are really big at this time. And everyone was selling them, at least here in the States. And I, there was like one that I'd read that like frankincense was supposed to be really helpful for vertigo. And so I bought this like big diffuser and I would like stick my head in and like try to snort.
I've done
And I was like, this doesn't even smell good. Like, what am I
that.
doing? That's probably the craziest I got.
Um, Now, your mom, do you
Yeah.
what's on parents monitoring their children's diet as a way to use almost like food as medicine, or if you're noticing your children having migraine symptoms, how would you, what's your best tip for young children to use food to help them through that journey?
Oh, sorry, my dog is going crazy. Coco, stop. Shh. Um, hopefully she'll just calm down. So I have just actually started working with the Danielle Foundation and Migraine at School, which Migraine at School does so much. Can you take her, Mom? Or why is she barking? Thank you. Okay. So Migraine at School is doing so much advocacy work actually for parents with children, and so is Danielle Foundation. So they're two amazing resources that I would definitely check out for parents if they feel like they need extra help. And Migraine at School especially is like helping parents navigate the school system and get support, especially from like school nurses and that sort of thing. I would say for children, a few of the things, and we were just on a meeting the other day and we were talking about this, but a few things to look out for. And one thing my neurologist brought up to me was that a lot of children present with motion sickness actually when before they are ever even diagnosed with vestibular migraine. There's actually been studies on it that show correlation specifically with vestibular migraine and motion sickness. Now, with other types of migraine, it's shown that people potentially grow out of that motion sickness. Um, so I just find that really fascinating in its connection to vestibular in general. But yeah, looking at things like motion sickness, if they get stomach aches a lot, abdominal migraine is very common in kids, even more than like they would have a head pain. Light sensitivity is another thing to look for if they're always like wearing sunglasses or wanting to be away from the sun. And that's something I've noticed with my daughter is she gets car sick and she is very sensitive to the sun, but she's still facing backwards in her seat. So I'm like, okay, trying to uh, be calm about it and not like to point out all of my migraine mind is not trying to point out all that yet. But I do feel empowered as someone who has lived with migraine to be able to help them in the future. And we're just getting so many more resources for children, and more doctors are starting to recognize abdominal migraine and these kind of symptoms better. So I would say just try to look out for those symptoms and bring it up with their physician. Say, look, I researched this. I've seen the literature on it and motion, its connection to motion sickness. And my daughter's complaining or my son is complaining about their head hurting, or they're saying the sun is too bright. These kind of things can be an inclination that like potentially they may be dealing with migraine. And there's a lot of natural. I see people with kids and young adults actually do really well with some of the dietary changes because their kids are relying so much on like energy. I've seen a lot of kids who are already doing caffeine every single day and they're, like 13 years old, or they're on sports drinks all the time. And so sometimes just doing these little shifts from having them with these bottled sports drinks that have caffeines and dyes and a lot of sugar to something a little more natural that you're making at home, or just getting them flavored water with fruit or something like that can be really beneficial to them too. So sometimes it's not always you don't need to jump straight to medication. You can do some of the natural things first, and it tends to work well for them too.
And just to wrap up, I think we're getting close to the end.
Sure.
What three top tips would you give for us this year to give migraine a break, which is our theme, with your rest
Okay.
years? And you share three things.
Three things. So I would say my most popular recipe in my cookbook and my website is called the anti-inflammatory smoothie. It's a smoothie that combines pears, actually, which is good for fiber, with a little bit of ginger and some greens too. So it's a great one. I've had a lot of people say if they can do it like right before an attack, or if they feel symptoms coming on, it's like extremely helpful at like lessening or lowering that attack. And it's the same thing, like you can use a lot of these anti-inflammatory foods to, if you can catch it early enough sometimes, which isn't always ideal, isn't always an option for us, but if you can catch it early, sometimes it can be really helpful. Using things like ginger, turmeric, and even cinnamon has been studied before as being helpful for migraine too. So that is a big one. I would also recommend. I have a new recipe out that's like a refreshing ginger drink on my website, and I've also made that into popsicles.
Oh,
So
that. It's
electrolytes, it has like electrolytes to it. So sometimes people with vestibular issues, the extra sodium is tricky, but for a lot of people with migraine, electrolytes, there's actually been studies that has shown that we can get depleted even going through a migraine attack. So this all goes kind of back to hydration. So these have a very light amount of like natural electrolytes and everything. So it's really helpful for if you're having a lot of vomiting, nausea, that kind of thing with your attacks. And these you can keep them in the freezer and then just have them as you need it. And I would say those are probably my three recipes that I would go to for like anything migraine attack in the moment, you know?
thank you so much. Very helpful. The gut health
Yeah,
has been a game changer for me,
yeah.
especially, and we really appreciate your work so much, Alicia. And yeah, I think with this, we're coming to the end of this episode. I probably need to go and buy that second book, that the Mediterranean diet. Is that what it's called?
The Mediterranean migraine diet, yes. And it's you can look up Alicia Wolf and Dr. Bay were the two authors of it. And so it's got a lot of good science in there that he's referenced to. And I think you guys would like it. I would send it to you for, if it weren't like $1 million to ship it across the ocean.
I will find it. Don't you worry. In the same way I found the Disney book, it's been a game changer. So, for those who are interested, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, thedizzycook.com, and then I am on social media. I'm on Instagram. I try to answer most of my messages there, and on Facebook. I'm not so great there with messages, but you can also reach me through email, whatever social media that you're on. I'll try to get to it as best I can. Yeah.
And so thanks again, Alicia, and to all of our viewers here today. Thank you for joining us. We're covering a range of topics this Migraine Awareness Month on how to give migraine a break. To learn more, head over to migraine.org.au or find us on socials. Thanks, Alicia. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you for having me.